Welcome back to the podcast, where we lean into conversations that challenge us, stretch us, and ultimately upgrade our thinking. And when we upgrade our thinking, we upgrade our lives. I'm your host, Clarissa Medina, a cognitive behavioral practitioner helping people break free from limiting beliefs through rewiring thought patterns. By using these methods, I facilitate an individual stepping into true transformation. Another excellent way to spark transformation and personal growth is through authentic conversations that challenge us to upgrade thinking and perspectives. Today's topic is one that may push the boundaries of what you have been taught, but that's exactly why we need to have it. We're diving into the question, why don't we see a greater expansion of divine healing within kingdom theology? Yeshua modeled what healing is supposed to look like, yet many believers turn first to a medical system that offers nothing divine. What's missing? What needs to shift? And what would it look like if we truly embrace the fullness of healing in the kingdom? Today, I'm honored to have Kellie Tierney with me. She is a personal friend of mine, a chaplain, missionary, pastor, and a divine healing coach. Kellie has spent years guiding others through spiritual transformation, and today we're diving deep into the role of divine healing in kingdom theology. What does true healing look like in the life of a believer? How does it tie into our faith and our walk with God? This is going to be a table flipping conversation. Kellie, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Clarissa. It's good to be here. Table flipping. I like that.
Each podcast episode starts out with the one question about the guest's compelling story. Kellie, today your question is, during your journey, you have been involved in missionary work, pastoring, chaplaincy, and divine healing. Has there been a pivotal moment, or was there a realization that caused you to want to focus so deeply on divine healing? And how should that expand within the kingdom today?
It's good. My husband suggested that I share my own story every time I share this. So I'm going to put it out there. When I was 21, I had an immune disorder called Guillain-Barré syndrome, and I was paralyzed for 3 months in the hospital. I was on so many prayer lists. I was on the 700 Club. I was on my church prayer list, you name it, and people were praying for me. And I was getting worse. And they had said I would not survive. My lungs were filling up and giving out. They said if I did survive, I wouldn't have children. If I did survive, I would be in a wheelchair. If I did survive, I would have no use of my hands. So they were not giving a very good prognosis. One day, my mom's employer at the time came walking in. He had a cane himself because he was going through something. And he had a little bottle of oil. That was the custom at that time. 20 years ago, most of your people had their little oil bottles. No harm, no foul. He anointed me with oil, and I believe it was the next day. My mom thought it might have been 2 days from then, but I thought it was the next morning when my doctor came in and he would examine me, and it was the same thing every day. Can you move your toes? Can you feel this? No, I can't do any of it. So he was down close to me and he said, can you move your toes? I didn't have good control yet. So I almost kicked him in the eye because my foot flew up off of the table. All of us were very surprised. A week, they began sitting me up, doing things. A week later, I came out of ICU into the room, and 2 weeks later, I went to rehab. A few weeks later, I left rehab. I could have pushed my wheelchair out, but they made you ride in the wheelchair to leave the hospital. And that was under my belt. I didn't dive into it then, but I always remembered that. Fast forward past where I finally started being friends with God many years later. Went to ministry school. After ministry school, I got married, wanted to have a child. I had ectopic pregnancies. I had no fallopian tubes left. One was completely severed, one was completely blocked. The doctor said, don't even try. So, about a week into my marriage, my daughter's father called me into the bathroom and said, I'm supposed to pray for you right now. Laid his hands on my stomach, declared, and we were pregnant in the first week or two of being married. So I jumped off the journey miraculously. But what really led me in is I couldn't get rid of allergies. That might sound little, but if people who've had a lot of allergies, with either food or drink or air because you can't get away from any of it. You have to eat, you have to drink. I've had some friends who've learned not to eat much or drink much and really govern their bodies, but most people eat regularly, drink regularly, and breathe the air. I was tired of being sick. I didn't like the medicine they were giving me because it made me asleep or drowsy. I just decided I'm going to do this the way I'm reading about it in the scriptures because Jesus, Yeshua, healed every time completely, expediently. My journey just began like that. Even though I enjoyed some of the other healthcare things I did, I enjoyed the thinking process of it. I enjoyed Oriental medicine. I was fairly proficient at acupuncture. The problem was every discipline besides the divine health stream had some problem you could not fix.
We've talked about that more than once. A patient in any of the medical systems, whether it's allopathy or homeopathy or naturopathy or Chinese medicine, acupuncture, any of it, there is going to come that point where you may very well get turned away and they say, we don't have anything else to offer you. We haven't made advances in that. We can help with this, but we can't help with that. Some of those big things might be paralyzation, or if somebody's had a stroke or stroke symptoms. There is a tier of illness that would be considered off limits to probably any of those. Maybe allopathy has some modalities that they use for those, but each system has its limit, basically.
Even though some systems seem a little easier on the body, a little more natural, I began leaning towards those for my own care. I would say that I had a lot of success with acupuncture, but I was managing, especially with allergies. Oh man, I was just managing all the time. It was exhausting. I'm just giving credit and honor in the different streams though. Acupuncture, other than divine healing, helped me in a way that didn't manage it. But it still ran into an end. I'll be honest with you, I gave that up because my religious structure at the time taught me that it was very demonic to do that. And that's just the way I thought right then.
Sure.
Yeah. So I gave that up completely.
Do you want to talk about how you started out in the medical world? Do you want to talk about that and let folks know where you were before you went fully into divine healing?
Yeah, sure. I come at this a lot more honorably than I used to, having learned to give out honor and love into streams of healing. And if it wasn't my current stream, maybe I made fun of it, or maybe I didn't honor it. But that is not the intention of this conversation at the time that we're having right now. I began to search the college I wanted to go to by where I wanted to dance instead of where I wanted to get educated. I ended up at Kilgore Junior College. I had to declare a major. And I walked by and saw a poster for physical therapy and went, I'll do that. I'm grateful to Father, Son, Holy Spirit that that's actually something I enjoyed. But honestly, that is how I ended up there. I always hated people's pain, and I always wanted people to feel better and be in health. It was something I always hated, pain, and it was something I always loved, people being well. I knew to stay in that vein as I chose a major, even though at that time I had no idea. It did not even cross my mind to go, Father, what would you want to do? How do you want to partner in this world? That did not even cross my mind. So I'm grateful that I landed in a field I really enjoyed. When some of the allopathic medicine began to fail me and I began to get more and more sick with kind of autoimmune type responses in my body. And by fail, all I mean is there was just nothing they could do for me. That's when I began to search Oriental medicine. And my favorite modality in Oriental medicine was actually acupuncture. I was in that for 2 years, became fairly proficient with my needles, and watched a lot of things happen that blew my mind as far as being able to help people, but would run into the same thing, limitations. Every one of them had limitations as much as we love them. What some people will do is you go to an MD for this, you go to a chiropractor for that, you go to an oriental medicine for this. You don't have to stay just in one stream. You can go to a nutritionist for this. And that was fine, but I was getting exhausted because I was using a lot of streams. They would tease me. They would say, "You're the sickest health nut I've ever met." And I was like, "You're right, I am." But I kept trying until I ran into Jesus and the way that I was reading in the scriptures, which was, wow, he just would say it. And he showed up believing it, just giving out. He wasn't begging the Father. This example really blew me away when Lazarus is there at the tomb and Yeshua's like, "I'm only going to say this out loud because the rest of you are here. Lazarus, come out," indicating that he didn't even have to say it out loud because he also could read people's mind and he was in the spirit in this different way. That story rocked me. The whole part of it rocked me. How Jesus brought healing, which sounded like, here's some mud in people's eyes, now go wash. Lazarus, come out. Go and sin no more. It was always a very quick command in kindness, compassion, and authority, not long, drawn out begging prayers. No begging the Father allowed.
Amen.
That began a whole study. I had to retrain my mind because I had been taught so much that sickness could be used to teach us a lesson. Remember those stories you would hear about terrible things, like maybe a little girl got ran over, and at the funeral, someone sadly would say God needed another flower in his garden. Well meaning people with misplaced theology. Or they would say, this is a big one, but look how many people met God at her funeral. So I had to unlearn that, oh no, my Father does not work like that.
That's right.
Not
There are
at all.
some things that you just have to decide that you can't be wishy-washy about. One of those things is that God the Father is not wishy-washy. He does not, in one instance, murder somebody, and in the other instance, decide to heal somebody.
Yeah.
You have to decide from the outset that he's good, that he's always for life, and that he's always for your healing.
Yes, yes. And that no matter what it looks like in the Old Covenant writings, I'm going to borrow from Dub on this. And I'm going to say it a little bit different, but God is good. God's always good. God has always been good. And this is the part I'll say a little differently, that we view God of the Old Covenant through the lens of Jesus all the time. And if they look like they don't match, then it's an invitation for discovery. Where is the goodness of God in this then? And how did this story get written this way? And what does this really mean? Because you're not going to move me anymore. Jesus only healed, only went about doing good, and he never put a sickness, illness, or disease on a person.
That's right. He never asked, what have you been involved in? If you weren't doing this, then you probably wouldn't
Yeah.
have this come upon you. He
Yeah.
didn't ever qualify anything, especially in the incidents where he healed hundreds and thousands. Either time that I'm thinking of, there would have been a multitude of various illnesses, infirmities, disorders, some physical, some mental. Who knows what those people would have been involved in? And those were never brought up.
Never.
It didn't matter. He walked in the confidence that this has to go, and it has to go in an instant. There's not a process. It has to go in an instance at my word.
Yes. I love that, the expediency of when he would say a thing. The longest time that we have is when he sent a word of healing to the centurion's house, to the servant. It said in that same,
Hour.
I believe, an hour is the longest instance that we have recorded. But the healing began immediately and was usually just right before everyone's eyes. Now, what I have learned is that it was a simple maneuver that Jesus did, simply declaring that Jesus knew the relationship with the Father. Jesus knew the goodness of the Father. Jesus knew the heart of the Father. And this is what I began to learn. I wasn't a better parent than the Father, than God the Father. And if I would never put a sickness, I don't care how upset I ever got with my daughter, I would never slap a sickness, illness, or disease on her to teach her a lesson. That really meant that I was haughty in thinking I'm a better parent than Father God, because He will do that. Just having to stop and think, what have I been taught? But
Yes.
what have I been taught about the nature of our Creator?
It doesn't even matter what biblical characters' opinions were about him and what some of the statements were about him. We know that his expressed nature looks like Jesus.
That's right.
So even if there is a misguided opinion within scripture, that does not mean that is the nature of the Father at all.
That's exactly right. And learning that scripture, it's beautiful for us, but things are written in there that we would never want to emulate.
That's correct.
Just
Yeah.
because it's written historically, or like you said, Jesus came to display the goodness of who the Father really was. So if there's a moment where they misunderstood God, especially in the old covenant, then we just get to apply Jesus, slap Jesus all over and let it straighten up in
Yes.
theology.
He came to set the record straight. So if there is a misguided opinion, a misunderstanding, one of those, oh, I thought you worked like this. He came to set the record straight and say, nope, I work exactly like the Father works. I say what the Father says. I do what the Father does.
Yes.
So at this point, moving forward, we don't really have an excuse.
The technology that we have now in medicine, some people are going to choose to do that. Some people are going to engage in different kinds of modalities and technologies in these different streams. And I'm just saying, no harm, no foul. I just usually swim in this stream of divine healing for many reasons. One is it's inexpensive. It just takes your time.
And it
to
takes no insurance.
It freed me up because to be a missionary, I'm glad that I learned how to do this because we have beautiful brothers and sisters in the Lord who just took off out to places and died of all sorts of diseases. They gave their lives truly in every way. But when I was getting ready to take off, I thought, I need to be prepared to have no medical insurance, not be able to get to a doctor of any kind, and to be able to live my life because I had chosen this statement: I am going to live every moment of my life allotted to me. And no one gets to kill me or murder me or take me out early.
Amen.
And so before I took off, so I've had some very interesting encounters. I've been raised from the dead. I've been healed in miraculous ways. I've been protected in a vehicle when a motorcycle was going to run into us and the driver fly through the window and harm or kill myself and the rider with me. An angel stood in between the back of my truck and that motorcycle, and that man ran right into it. And there were witnesses all around that saw this happen. Although it was sad watching the motorcycle rider perish, the Lord told me I was in bed. I was sick with grief over this person. And He finally said, Kellie, my eyes were on you, and that person ran into the back of me. They had been speeding everywhere. They had been warned repeatedly, and there was nowhere to go once they got in trouble speeding. And they ended up dying in kind of treacherous behavior. God didn't kill them. They were speeding around, but I was protected to live and not die.
Yes. Declarations matter.
They matter. I would say I'm expanding more now to include the eternal now, which you could call that immortality, and what that means and how to get there. That the cool end result of true divine health would be immortality.
100%. Sometimes we have to double down on some things.
Yeah.
And it's never to take away anybody's freedom in what they believe or what system they want to go with, because there's one system that is higher than divine healing, and that is the system of freedom. Jesus allowed freedom of thought, freedom of behavior, and there may be consequences with all of that. He was not interested in getting in the middle of somebody's free will and forcing them into a system of anything, a system of belief or a system of healing, nothing. So anything that we say on here in terms of divine healing is not meant to shame anybody that wants to continue choosing another system. We're just highlighting the example that Yeshua gave on earth and what actual divine healing looks like. Divine healing doesn't look like going to the hospital and coming out. I'm not trying to take away a miracle of a hospital healing, because I know we have them. We have people that have gotten healed, but that's not divine. Somebody getting healed through acupuncture needles, that is not divine. What we are talking about specifically is the divine healing where a word is spoken and a malady or a disorder has to go on the spoken word.
Absolutely. A touch also, but the power of God to change and relieve a person from sickness, disease, trauma. And it's only the power of God. Now, I have been in hospitals. I went a couple of years ago with a mutual friend of ours and stayed there in the hospital for a long time, watched miracles in the hospital. It's not my favorite way. It's expensive. It can be longer, but I was totally grateful at what I saw there. But having lived a life of 15 years in hospitals, in and out as a therapist, I much prefer not living my life in a hospital.
I agree.
I work so much in teaching people and facilitating them into being able to come in to living this way in their own life, because I don't want to go to the hospital for everybody. I want you to be able to handle your stuff. I want you to be able to handle your family. So even in a pastoral situation with a missionary team, they would tell me so and so's in the hospital, and I would say, "Hey, listen, you've been training for a year and a half. You get on up there."
Yes. Empowered sons and daughters, that's what it looks like.
I used this today with permission from Deb Alexander, the chart where we begin as an orphan mindset, to have no part in, to have no share in, no inheritance, moving from orphan mindset with bodily health into sonship or daughtership with that, where you begin to govern yourself better. You begin to believe, you begin to understand, of course, health is the children's bed. But that first step into sonship and daughtership, you have to believe that you get that bread. You can move into king and queenship so that we can steward and govern this to other people. And what I'm looking to move in would be what he would have as mothering or fathering, which is I just show up and the presence of me with heaven in the place shifts it into order. That is what he looked like a lot. He would show up and they would come to him. They would come to Yeshua from all over. Rarely did he go over and seek them out. I'm moving into that area. Always room to get deeper with the Father.
Absolutely. There's always room for upgrades in thought.
Level
Always.
up. That's right.
Speaking of the pattern, Yeshua's disciples, we know they were empowered to heal. Why do you think modern disciples, folks that would say, I'm a disciple of Jesus, why they're not walking in the same power? Do you think it's a lack of understanding, a lack of training, a lack of belief?
That is a really good question. I think that would be answered differently depending on where you live in the world, but I'm going to answer that from living right here in the United States during this time. Part of it is not understanding the power that is within you to let it out. We've been trained for a long time in salvation from the pulpit to get saved. And that would just be to not go to an eternal conscious torment or hell, being either a main part of the gospel message or a little part. Instead of, wow, we are sons and daughters, we are friends, we are one, we're living this life running with the creator of all things. And in that place, this is how we live. We bring things that are out of joint into joint. We bring things that are in dis-ease into ease. We act just like the one that was firstborn among many. But the gospel has shifted in this country at this time to a place where it is a low frequency of living. That would be my first part of the answer. Another part would be we simply have a lot of choices here.
It's
We
true.
have a lot of choices of medical streams. And if we answer it honestly, many of them are effective for many things. You can see symptom relief. Pharmaceuticals have gotten better, more efficient. Techniques have gotten better. You've got your chiropractic care. You've got your oriental medicine care. You've got homeopathy, naturopathy. We have a load of choices. And what many are taught is that the healers are your doctors and nurses and therapists, instead of it is the right and the responsibility of every believer to be able to give out healing and health. I would say poor training, poor thought training is the number one. Number two is lots and lots of choices.
Part of that poor training would be we don't focus that much on earth. The Western evangelical model focuses on heaven.
Yes.
And that's where all of our problems will be solved. That's where all of our bodies will be fixed. All of our mental illnesses will be fixed. But down here on earth, we just kind of have to put up with these things. We have to put up with infirmity. We have to put up with anxiety. We have to put up with not being able to have good sleep. We have to put up with a corrupt food system, all of these things. I would simply argue that in biblical times, they had technology. They had a technology of the day. They had a food system of the day. They had pharmaceuticals of the day. So we really don't have anything that they didn't have. We have different things that they didn't have. They had medical system of the day, but we don't focus on earth. So we teach and we focus on that all of these things are just a part of life. And I think they had a better understanding in that time that these things really are not supposed to be a part of life. At least the children of God did. Now, I can't talk about the Egyptian. I can't talk about the pagan because the Egyptian culture had a medical system. But it's very simple to look at the scriptures and see God declares that he is your healer and that not even your cattle will miscarry. He's setting a precedent and he's setting what the culture of the children of God is supposed to look like. And that does not include sickness.
Exactly. I like that you included the Egyptians because what we're finding is they were very tech advanced. We had made assumptions that we are getting smarter and better and ignoring a lot that has been lost, forgotten, or changed. So I'm glad you said that. Now, and let me clarify something that you brought up. Lots of choices, like you said, in the community. There was always a healing method in the law. Even in the Jewish law, you could bring certain sacrifices and the priest would do certain things, and there was always healing available. And let me say this better. Choices for the modern American in this system compared to when I would go to Albania. And it was pretty scary being in the hospital at that time.
Sure. Oh, yes.
People would say, you might want to decide whether you go or not. Now, in Chile, it was very different. There were nice, modern, great medical system there. But a lot of my friends from Africa, when I was in Thailand, it depends on where you were. The remote villages we were in, there was no other way. So it depends on where you are. And stories that I have is when they had no other way, it seemed like they would pull this out of you. Their faith would collide with what you have and just pull it right out. So that's what I'm talking about. Modern day choices, depending on where you are and what's going on.
In the example that I brought up about the Western evangelical system that focuses more on getting the glorified body after you die and just putting up with whatever illnesses and infirmities that you have to put up with while you're here. We've had some teachings around what would be called spiritual warfare. And that when you are ill, that God has allowed this to happen. A lot of the church models do believe that God wants you to be healed, but for whatever reason that you may not know in the earthly realm, he has allowed this to come upon you. And so you have to do spiritual warfare correctly if you want to get this off of you. How would you comment about the spiritual warfare aspect? I know you and I agree about spiritual warfare in that we don't really have to do spiritual warfare to get an illness or an infirmity to leave. But yet it is believed quite largely across many denominations that God and the demonic are in this back and forth fight. And sometimes they get the upper hand, but everything they do, he lets them do because they really work for him. They just don't know it. And so part of that is they put sickness on people.
It's so painful to even hear you ask the question. Truly, compassion rises up inside for what we've been tormented by with poor training in our mind. I'm going to answer that in pieces. There's a lot there. Let me ask you to define spiritual warfare a little bit more. What do you mean by spiritual warfare?
The devil sees you and you're doing some pretty good stuff. And you're really moving in your love of God, and you've got your family rocking, and everything with your work is going well. And man, I don't like it. Kellie is down there. She's doing all this good. She's talking to people about the Lord and she's healing people. I'm going to afflict her with something and I'm going to put her where she belongs. I'm going to knock her down a notch or two. And so that the devil has this power where he can just zap you with some kind of sickness, with some kind of mental disorder, and that God is over here. I'm going to let this happen to my daughter, Kellie, and I'm going to watch how she develops her spiritual warfare ability because she's going to survive this, but it's going to take all the faith that she can rev up in her engine, and she's going to have to say all the right things, and she's going to have to fast, and she's going to have to pray. That's the spiritual warfare model that I'm talking about.
I'm reshaping as well on a lot of these things. Even though I'm still moving right along with divine health, things are shifting right and left in understanding. So I'll start with, as a person thinks, so are they. Our thought life, what we think, is very important. What we believe is very important. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm still landing on how I speak to sickness, illness, disease, how that lands on people. If there's a demonic force able to still be behind that after the finished work of the cross. This is one of the things that the Lord taught me about thinking, things are going great. Like the example you give, things are going great. I'm doing stuff for the kingdom. Now I have a target on my back.
Yes, we teach people that.
Or now I have the devil breathing down my neck because of this. The Lord said, I said the enemies had been made a footstool. We are living in that. So retaliation is not a thing that is allowed any more than the sickness, illness, or disease. Because if that enemy is retaliating, they're not a footstool. They're able to aim at your back, or they're able to be on your neck. So that was the first thing he said. And what we get to do as sons and daughters, kings and queens, mothers and fathers, those taking our place right now, we get to live in that very finished and upgrading kind of place. Here's another response to that. I'm looking at how the apostles handled sickness, illness, and disease, and what would look like demonic oppression, familiar spirits, things like that. This would be post resurrection, post ascension of Jesus, because we live an ascended life, not just a resurrected life, but an ascended life.
That's right.
So, post ascension of Jesus, the apostles still taught a little bit about commanding demonic forces to leave, but they didn't have to open a portal. They didn't have to wave a flag. They didn't have to do anything other than just release it. Release that word, release the power, release the authority. Now, my personal kind of rethinking here is, where does that demonic picture fit right now in this finished ascended life? Here's the hopeful part. Am I allowed to talk just a little bit about us declaring together?
Yeah, for sure.
I might let you actually tell the story if you wanted to, but I'll preface it with this. We weren't exactly sure how everything works right now in this beautiful kingdom, this beautiful, expansive realm. We just knew that we could tell it to leave you alone. And we were learning if our words were off a little bit here and there, that the Father of all things, the creator of all things, was there with us, wanting with us, backing us up.
I continue to upgrade my thinking about this too, because like you said, I haven't fleshed out how the system of darkness still works, whether it's simply by agreement and wrong thinking. And certainly agreement and wrong thinking would be, I just have to put up with sickness while I'm here. That would definitely be an example of wrong thinking. Maybe it's as simple as that. Either way, we know that healing was already a foregone conclusion. We know that it was included in the cross, salvation and healing, regardless of what our thoughts are about it and regardless of how we speak to it. We know our thoughts toward it and our words toward it don't undo the fact that it's already a done deal.
One of my main mentors would be John G. Lake, and John G. Lake Ministries, that Curry Blake is the administrator of, and they very much spoke to sickness and illness and disease as an entity, and very effective. John G. Lake's ministry, we each have examples of that ministry being very effective.
Yep.
And that is their thought process, that they are speaking to an entity. And it has been exceedingly effective. My question is that system supposed to remain, or as a people all together, are we overtaking this earth with the glory of God in such a way that system shifts? That's where I'm thinking and mulling and upgrading.
My hope is that we are teaching the upgrade in thought,
Yeah.
that people don't have to believe that sickness is their lot.
Yes.
I will say it is at least an upgrade in thinking if a believer goes from believing that sometimes God puts sickness on you to teach you something to move into sickness is always demonic. There is at least an upgrade there in not ascribing sickness to any part of the Trinity. But I would even like to see all of the collective consciousness believe that, no, we actually don't have to deal with sickness. It's a trespasser. It's always something to be fought.
Yes.
My belief with anything that we're trying to raise the belief system about is that once you quit going into that set of beliefs, that it will bankrupt it and it will no longer have a place to land in.
It's good.
I don't know what the tipping point is. Our thoughts create structures and our beliefs create structures. I don't know what the percentage is of people that need to believe this to start bringing down some structures in the unseen realm, structures that support the belief that sickness is just a part of life, that death is just a part of life. And instead, we're erecting structures that believe that our inheritance is health and immortality, because I'm right there with you. Immortality is one of those things that I'm doubling down on. I'm going to be interviewing Michael King in about a week, and we're going to talk about all things immortality. I believe in it that much. I know he believes in it that much, and we're going to put it out there. And I can get called a weirdo, and I don't even care.
It's a topic that needs to be dealt with. See yourselves as Yeshua, Jesus, in the scripture. So in the story, do not see yourself as the woman with the issue of blood. What you're saying is that the upgraded thinking would be, we see ourselves as, he said he was the firstborn among many. We're part of the many here, and we have no record or reason to believe that Yeshua in the physical body, in the flesh, had a sickness, illness, or disease. They couldn't kill him before his time. As a matter of fact, he struggled in the garden with not calling on the legion to come and abort the mission. If the collective understanding raises to, no, we live this life exactly like Jesus. We don't need the rescue of Jesus and all of these things. We don't even need to live through the authority. We need to live the exact life the exact ability.
Yes. If he had that ability as human, because we don't even identify with the Gethsemane experience, we don't even identify with sweating blood. I know what will happen is that some listeners will be tempted to turn this into, I just have to take up my cross.
Oh,
And
boy.
this is just my cross.
Yeah.
But that's not even the Jesus that
No.
we identify with.
Right.
We identify with the Jesus that's off the cross, that is ascended and is at the right hand of the Father.
Yes.
And if the human Jesus walked in as much power and authority as he did,
Right.
then what does the ascended Jesus look like?
And even though we have examples of the apostles continuing to deal with a language that would be dealing with entities or demonic forces, well, we have a pattern of them learning. We have a pattern of what am I supposed to eat or not eat? And I was like, wow, they learned the rules they put into place at first in the scriptures. If you watch them at the end, they were like, just don't fornicate or drink blood and figure out what does the fullness of this freedom look like.
I'm not even trying to portray that I have it all figured out or that you have it all figured out. What we're trying to do is to continue growing in the fullness of the stature of Yeshua.
Yes.
Part of his stature is not agreeing with lack, not agreeing with decay, not agreeing with sickness, not agreeing with death. Not understanding the mechanics of it doesn't dismiss you from being out of agreement with it, and it doesn't dismiss you from still pressing in to all things that promote life and that promote health. Regardless of my lack of understanding or lack of a specific word from the Father, I just know I don't agree with decay. I don't agree with corruption of life. I don't agree with death on any level.
Agreed. You've been bold about this all along. It's been fun to watch. When we first started talking about immortality, I had to be honest with you and say it challenged me, because I believe what I said to you is I'm not living a life right now that I want to live forever. And so that's a challenging conversation to have with yourself and with heaven and with the realms and those that are in the room with you at all times. Challenging conversation. Okay, then what needs to shift? And one of my prayer partners on an international call said, yeah, I was working on eternal goals the other day. I was like, oh, meaning there's short term and long term and eternal goals?
I love it.
That needs to be, that's where my mind.
Note to self.
Yeah.
Writing that down.
Eternal goals. Part of me thinks, what if I'm tapping into immortality, but the people that I live life with closely don't? And I'm watching them all pass into immortality through death's door, which is a way to do it. And it's what's been taught. It's the most common way right now, even if there is an upgrade. That's coming, by the way. We've been promised this new earth. We've been promised this new way. And unless we believe that Yeshua's going to come riding in on a white horse and kill everybody, unless that's the method, then what we believe is we're part of the shift.
That's right. I would say I actually do have a life that I would want to live forever, even with all of its bumps and bruises and uncertainties. I don't want to miss a thing. I think walking with the Lord is so incredible. I'm hog. I don't want to miss seeing anything that he's doing in the earth, even if he's not doing it through me. I love watching him work in other people's lives. So if I'm still here at this same address and I'm still wearing these same clothes and I'm still doing this same job for a living, then I'll just do it forever. I hope to get an upgrade in my thinking for that, because I would definitely love to step into even more of some of these belief systems that we're talking about. But even the simple life I have now, yes, give me 500 years of this and let me have 500 years of seeing the Lord work in the earth. I just love it.
Oh, I appreciate that. It challenged me to make some shifts. The life that I'm living now with Mark and in this place, I am shifting much more, but I appreciate the little kick in the pants that I had from you to look at myself and go, because many of us have just resigned to only 70, 80, 90 years of this, and then I get to go to the good stuff.
Right.
I get to the good bits after this. And I had to begin shifting from that thought pattern intentionally.
Yes, it takes intention. And I don't have all the answers to how to even do that every day, but I know it starts with belief. The belief that not only I can, but the belief that it's an option for me, it's available to me. The funny thing is, if I were in the New Age community, and I'm using those terms so that the listeners can have something to identify with, if I was in the New Age community and said I believed in immortality, I wouldn't be ridiculed. People would be asking me what my secret was.
Yeah.
The New Age community, it's like they're given clearance that a believer isn't given. And that right there just proves how much we believe that death is just part of the picture, because somebody in the New Age movement can believe in divine healing and can believe in immortality, and nobody bats an eye. But if a believer chooses to do that, we've just ingrained our thinking so much with death, and death is just part of your journey here. I do definitely want to see a change in that. I hope that I do get to see it. I hope that in my 500-year lifetime that I will get to see people that are like, hey, that Clarissa, she was onto something. Look
Well,
at her.
somebody's got to change the long-term goal for life, because right now, most of them, right, the plan is born, die. That's the plan. And then you fill in everything in between.
Yes.
I like to kid around sometimes about New Age, because really, New Age is unbelief standard Western evangelical church, truly, because that's not what was happening with the early church fathers, with the Celtic saints, with it was just wild stuff going on. But even crystals and different modalities of healing, light therapies, these different things, they're beautiful as well. And they're emerging in the believers. Again, I would differentiate and say it's still another beautiful stream. It's not divine health. Feel free to buy all the crystals you want. Feel free to light therapy. Feel free to do it all. But I just draw the line. It doesn't matter how holistic it seems. Frequency is being understood again, unlocked. It's a heralding going on right now. But what I'm looking for is the frequency that Jesus tapped into.
Yes.
The frequency came out of Jesus. It emanated out of his body. It emanated where he could read minds, where he could sense people's hearts and feelings, and where whatever he was putting out drew to him. Anything that was out of order, anything that needed alignment could run to him through frequency. Because honor is so important to me, I never try to dishonor those streams when I'm making a line of difference. I'm not trying to throw one into dishonor.
I'm going to have some of those folks. Matter of fact, I've already interviewed one. I want to have some of those people on the podcast and hear their perspectives and their journey to make the distinction of what we're saying about divine healing is no additional modality, just the spoken word.
Mm-hmm.
And the spoken word isn't getting God to do something because it's already been done. It's just tapping into the frequency that was already laid down centuries ago, that is our inheritance.
Jesus was not even going to speak the word out loud to Lazarus. However, the word himself, however those words of frequency would come out, because most of us have not mastered that right now, most of us will speak the word.
It is an important distinction, because we tend to think that if we let the kingdom flow through us, there has to be an outward expression of that. There has to be something viewable, something that people can see, rather than just sending the thought. I actually don't believe that it has to be strictly the spoken word. I believe that I could send the thought and I can send healing and let it flow through the Father, through me, onto where it needs to be. I don't know why we like the outward expression of that. Maybe just so that people have something to see, perhaps something tangible, something that they can see with their eyes.
The rest of the story is when he stopped and cried or groaned. That could have been the moment that he actually released what was needed. Lazarus. There's been a lot of theories about what that was. I'm convinced that he knew what he was going to do, so he wasn't grieving over Lazarus being dead. That would be ridiculous. Then I heard a teaching that he was grieved over their lack of belief. He was grieved over their unbelief, but an upgrade in my thinking would lead me to believe the groaning that he released was the only sound frequency needed to get Lazarus up.
Yeah. The healing is out there. It's
Yeah.
already done. It doesn't require me to speak it. It's out there. Now, how do we harness it? Sometimes I think we believe we have to speak it to harness it. But if you want to get down to the absolute foundational level, you don't even have to. It's vibrationally out there.
As we get better and improve, maybe it will be more of a groan that is also growing in use and in understanding of just letting out the sound and the frequency. Much to ponder, much
Yes,
to learn and ponder.
definitely. If we were to see this shift in the collective consciousness, how would you think our culture would change? What would daily life start to look like?
The billions and billions of dollars and the money and currency spent worldwide for people to regain their health would be spent on something else. The time and the energy that so many of us spend on trying to just regain health and then keep it would be spent on other things. One of the ladies that I interviewed this weekend on this topic, what she said is it was really hard to bear a lot of fruit from my deathbed. So the shift into life in every way, in finances, in time, in thought, in ability, in what people are able to give and produce. This is not saying that people have not done miraculous things while ill, because they have, or in the sick bed. But if you ask them, how was that for you? Would you have been able to do that more easily in more bliss if you weren't thrown in a sick bed to do that? Not by God, not thrown by God. But if you weren't in a sick bed, I believe most people would say, yeah, it would
Sure.
have been easier, better, and more blissful. What gets confusing is they probably learned a lot of lessons. So it gets confusing and they think God threw me in the bed sick so I would learn these lessons. But that's a poor teacher. I would never do that as a teacher. We would have time, finances, energy to focus on art, music, love, spiritual architecture, so many things, because the biggest industry that's out there is healthcare.
I like that Brother Curry also mentions that when you are sick, when you're ill, when you're in a sick bed, you can't serve. Whatever talents and giftings you have, you can't heal anybody else. You're not really probably even focused on anybody else's healing. It puts you in the position of always having to be cared for, even from a perspective of other people receiving healing. You're certainly not doing that. I like that he mentions that, because I don't think we think about it. That's really what we're here to do. We're here to serve humanity with the kingdom, with the system of heaven. If we're constantly being cared for because of an infirmity, then we are not putting it out.
Exactly. I've worked with so many people on this, and it's such a tender topic. I'm just going to pour some mercy in this moment, that those who are listening that maybe are still dealing with a great sickness, those who have had a different kind of teaching and thought that they were really serving God by tolerating what they're tolerating. It's just a mind shift away. And there's mercy for us as we do that. There's mercy as we learn. There's people who have given their lives to serve as best they could from a very compromised position.
Yes.
But it still does minimize the amount of what we can do if we stay compromised. So, with honor and with mercy and respect, we say these statements of truth with great love and care.
Absolutely.
We say these statements strongly.
I want to thank my listeners for tuning in today. And I really do hope that, besides finding this conversation challenging, I hope that it was inspirational and gave you lots of seeds planted in your mind to think about and upgrade your own faith journey in any small way that you can. I want to thank Kellie for coming on the show and being willing to have a challenging conversation.
Thanks, Clarissa. I love speaking with you. It's quite refreshing, and I appreciate what you're doing, and I appreciate your challenging thought process and challenging things that are not the highest good.
Awesome. Thank you for coming on. And until next time, I'll see all of you later.
Bye.
Bye.